Hey guys, I'm Juliana and you're watching Sprocket Girl. Today I'm here with Joel, aka Bearded MTBr, and we're going to switch out Graham's front tire. He got a totally new front tire, this is the old one, and I've never done it. Joel has done it, and I wanted to learn how to do it. So we're going to do this together.
So right now he has a Minion DHR2 on the front, which is kind of funny. He did not put this on. The actual bike shop we bought it from did that. So we're going to put a Minion DHF on the front. This is a 2.5. Should give him a wider profile, more side knobs for leading the bike over and kind of carving with it a little bit. So see how this goes.
Also, disclaimer, we're not funded by any of these brands that we're showing today.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by anyone. And then I also just wanted to clarify, I also don't claim to be a mechanic. I've learned a few things from doing this a couple times, so I'm going to teach those to you guys, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the things we're going to be working with. We're going to show one method of doing this without the compressor. Most bike shops use a compressor when they change tires and when they seat the bead. But we're going to do it without that. Kind of show you guys how to do that. Most people who are getting into mountain biking don't have a compressor handy. We do have one, so in case we do need it to seat this, we can use that. But we're going to try to go with the kind of smart method and a better way of doing it, I think.
So what is seat or seed the bead? Seat?
So yeah, it's S-E-A-T, seat, like you were sitting down. That's seating the actual bead of the tire, which is this kind of hardened rim. Basically that sits inside this groove in the rim. And when we go through that, we'll kind of talk about that and kind of show you what that looks like.
Cool.
So here's the tire. We're going to put 2.5 on the front. I believe he has a 2.25 or a 2.3 right now.
2.3.
2.3.
And that number refers to what? The width?
So that is the rough estimate of inches of how wide the tire will sit. So here are the tools we're going to use. So we talked about the tire. Here it is. I gave Juliana and Graham some of my old stands, no tubes, mountain biking sealant. I use orange right now, and I like that a lot more. So we're going to give this a shot. It works fine. It's been great for me. I just gave it to Graham and Juliana. So we're going to put that in there. We're going to tape the rim. We're going to start by taking the tire off, cleaning it up, and then taking all of the old factory tape that came from Santa Cruz and from the old bike shop. We're going to take that off the rim and give it a nice clean finish. If we have some isopropyl alcohol, we'll use that to clean it. And then we'll retape. I like to use Gorilla tape. A lot of mechanics will swear by this, and also kind of handy people who like to do their bike work will do it with Gorilla tape, and so that's what we're going to use. Again, I've used this a lot on my own bike, and it's awesome. It works like a charm. We might have to put in a new stem. Probably not, just depends on the condition of his. Some of the factory stems that they put into the rims are kind of junky, and the valves are kind of a little finicky. So this is a nicer way of doing that, kind of fixing that problem. Gives the pressure, the PSI reader a good reading, and it's more accurate. We're going to use the old-fashioned Park Tool tire levers. These things are awesome. I've snapped a few, so we'll see what happens today.
That's why we have 4 of them?
Yeah. We're going to do it the smart way, so that involves actually removing the valve core, and we'll talk about what that looks like. And so there's this tool by Park Tool. Again, we're not sponsored by them. It's just handy, and we'll want to use this. If you try to use pliers to take it out, you can do it that way. I've done it before, but you risk stripping out the actual threads, and it can damage the valve core. And then this is what we use to actually insert the sealant into the actual valve, rather than breaking the bead after we seat it. So again, we'll talk about what that looks like after we go through it.
Cool.
And then of course, here's the pump. We're going to do it the old-fashioned style, so here we go.
So we have to undo this, I don't know what what you call this.
Quick release.
Quick release. And just unscrew it. It's pretty straightforward. And then you have this, I don't know the technical names for these things. What is this part?
It's the axle, front axle.
The axle, we just removed the axle.
Yeah, you're taking out the through axle. Right.
And then just kind of shimmy the wheel out. There you go. That was pretty quick and easy.
Can you explain what you're doing with that? How do you take the air out?
How do you take the air out of a tire? You unscrew the screwy part. What do you call it?
Sorry.
How do you take
The screwy part?
Alright, so we unscrew the head here. Anyone has probably done this before. And it's released here.
Nice.
Now the other thing to remember is sometimes if there's a lot of sealant in the tire, because there is sealant in here. When Graham bought this bike, he bought it set up tubeless, which means there is sealant in there and it's been taped. So what she's done is good, because if there were sealant in there, and we already checked, there's very little, if not any, in here, but it would be sitting in the bottom part of this tire, and the fact that she's holding it here means that the sealant's not going to shoot out of the valves.
So all our bikes have Presta valves, and all of us are riding tubeless tires here. Okay, does it make a difference if whether we remove the valve first or the tire?
It does not matter. What I recommend doing is breaking the bead, because right now the tire is still sat on the rim, and so at this point you'd want to break the bead, and in case we wanted to reuse the actual stem on this here, if you can see that, we want to make sure we insert the tool somewhere that's not necessarily right there next to that rubber gasket. So while she's doing that, or while we're about to do that, the other thing I want to talk about is the tire. So the tire has been packaged and kind of rigged up by the shop and or the manufacturer that's been packaging it. And while we remove this and get this one ready, we want to make sure that we cut these bands here and let the tire relax, because if you were pumping it up with a hand pump or floor pump, we want this rubber to be as supple and as easy as we can get it to seat on that rim as possible. So it's a little finicky. This is the hard part of removing everything. While she's working on that, here's the tire that's been undone, and so it's kind of in a circular fashion. It looks like it's going to fit pretty nicely. So I just want to make sure it hangs, and I like to just put it right on the handlebars, just like that. If we have a good stand, it should be no problem. And it's kind of just going to relax a little bit, so it'll be a little more supple. So she's opened it up nicely. All right, nice job. So then what you're going to do is insert the tool just like that. Yep. Just so you can get under there and pop it out, and then just go around. Exactly. So she's removed one sidewall and she's unsat the bead on one side. Perfect. Now come to the other side. It should be super easy. There you go.
You don't even need the tool.
There you go. Nice job. Just pull it right off the rim.
Wow, look how grimy that is.
So notice that notice there's no sealant in here.
Yeah.
So Graham's been had a lot of leakage issues because there's been no sealant in here, and the little that was left inside was actually absorbed by the tire. You can see the residual, it's kind of gummy and gluey, and that's the sealant that's actually been sucked into the tire.
Gross.
And we can also check that by noting that there's like nothing on this rim here. This tape that we see is the factory tape, in my opinion, is not very good. That's why I always like to retape when I get the bike and I put new tires on there. We're about to take this tape off. Now if you look closely, I don't know if you can see that with the lighting, there is a little lip we can pull from.
Oh.
But we're going to be inhibited by the valve, because the valve was inserted after the rim's been taped. So before we do that, we have to take that valve out.
Okay. I'll take it out.
And it unscrews simply, and it shouldn't be too tight, and you can't do it with your hands. A lot of misconceptions is that it needs to be super tight, and it doesn't, as long as it's been taped properly and seated correctly.
So what is it?
You shouldn't have to really tighten it that much. So I'm actually going to show you guys how to take out the actual valve core. So make sure this thing's all loose. And the core is the separation between the larger cylinder and the smaller threads there. And so we're actually going to take that core out so we can just whack it. And it shouldn't hurt anything because that core is the sensitive part. Just like that. And it's gripping it and unscrewing it. So you can see the actual piece coming out. Boom. There's the core. And this is the part where everyone talks about the valve core, the valve core. And this one looks in very good shape. The gasket's still present. It's not gunked up. We might be able to reuse this. And so now we can just push on this and it comes right out. Okay, so we've taken the factory tape off, that clear residual plastic essentially, and we're just going to give it a nice wipe over to make sure there's no dirt and grime left in there. And what she's done is she's soaked the rag there, and you want to make sure you use a rag that's like an automotive rag, something that's not going to leave cotton pieces and random straggly hairs of thread or anything like that. So it's a nice clean surface. And she's used just some regular old isopropyl alcohol and just giving it a nice wipe over. Okay, so the nice thing about using isopropyl is that it dries really quickly. It evaporates very, very quickly. And so that's why we use that instead of soap and water. It's not going to hurt anything, you just have to make sure you let it dry before you actually try to tape it again. So we'll let this sit for about, I don't know, another minute or two, and then we'll get to taping. Now, we want to make sure we locate the hole for the valve in the rim, which I'm not seeing. Oh, there it is. Okay, awesome. And so there it is, and we want to make sure we have some overlap. And you want at least 2 overlaps of tape. So I like to start kind of offset from where that valve would go into the rim. So I'll start maybe 3 or 4 spokes over, and I'll just wrap all the way around. Now the thing is you want to make sure you do it really tightly, neatly. So center the tape, make sure it's nice and taut, and then just go really slowly but really carefully, because this is the tedious part about prepping and then kind of making sure everything's sealed correctly.
So are we going to then poke a hole through the tape so that the valve can come back out?
Yep.
Back through this hole? Yeah,
so we will, and that's another tedious part. We want to make sure that we don't actually poke a big hole. We want to make sure we poke like a nice X, so that there's still some overlap tape that gets shoved into that hole with that
that's smart.
That gasket that's formed with the valve.
Okay.
Can you hold that? Mm-hmm. So we're going to cut that first bit of tape off. Safety first, kids. There we go. So now we can go ahead and tape. Now I'm not trying not to touch that sticky part. So nice seal forms with it. So I'm gonna kind of come over here, offset from where that
the hole is here.
Hole is, yep. That's where my pinky is, and so now we're gonna kind of put that tape inside there.
Here, you want to get that on top.
And we want to center it inside that rim. So this is actually a really good size for this rim because it's a little bit skinnier than mine. So nice, lay that in there and then work it outward. Get a nice formed suction in there. And once you've got that nice sticky part started, all the way up to the edge of the rim, then this is where we'll put some tension on it and actually start taping.
So tell me again why we're taping. Like, what is the purpose of the tape here?
So if you look closely at the rim, where the nipples of the spokes come through and get tightened, there's a hole. Yeah. And so you'll have air leakage that comes through there. So when we fill the tire with sealant, we want to make sure that everything is basically watertight. Yeah. As well as airtight, of course.
That makes sense.
So I'm working that down in there, making sure everything's stuck nicely. And again, I'm working from the inside out. So once I've stuck the part where it's covering the actual holes in the rim, then I work my fingernails into the actual bead, the part where the bead would fit into the rim. All right, so we're getting close to where the valve hole would be. It's right here, right underneath my finger. And we're coming up to the overlap of where we started. So we want to come past that nice and tight. And we want to make sure that this end is nicely stuck down. Sometimes it'll try to come up even after you come all the way around. So then we'll come down nice, even, uniform. And then when we push down, we want to make sure that we can feel that ridge and there's an overlap where our hole would be, right in there. So we're gonna come all the way across that, probably end about equidistant from where we started on the other side of that hole. Okay, so we've cut it, put that aside, and we want to make sure this nicely comes in here and sticks down nice. And get that out of the way of that bead. Perfectly centered. Nice and tight. Okay, and then another touch I like to do right before I start trying to seat the bead is I find where that valve's going to come through. I've already lost it. There. And I like to put another patch right over the top of it. Just kind of give it a little more meat to work with. So that when we put that valve core and stem in there, it'll sit nicely on that tape. Okay, so Graham has opted to put in the new valve and the new valve core that he bought. It's nice because it has a nicer rubber gasket on the bottom. It's in way better shape.
And it's blue.
And it's blue and it matches his bike. Yeah. But yeah, like the other one's all gunked up on the bottom and kind of cheap. The shops kind of do that just because they can get away with it. So we'll start by taking the core out, and the reason we do that is because we're going to be seating this tire with a floor pump. And so this will make our life much easier.
And I know how to do that now.
Perfect.
There you go. It's pretty straightforward.
So we found the hole in the rim where the core is going to go in right there. And we want to make sure that we go in the direction that we've taped. So we don't want to push through this way because that'll unseat the tape. We want to push through this way.
Okay.
Which means we want to make sure that we have a nice puncture for us to do that. Common misconception is that we have to make that hole really big, and you don't want to make that hole very big at all. You want to make it as small as possible.
Gotcha.
So what we'll do is probably cut an X with the knife and then insert.
Okay.
Jillian's going to hold the rim for us, and she's located the hole right about there. And if you can kind of feel that indentation where that hole is going to be. So I'm going to estimate roughly, and then just make a nice quick puncture. And then we're going to go across, and then we're going to go the direction of the rim. So if you look at it, you won't actually see much of a hole at all, but we're going to push through the rest. So we're going to take our O-ring off here. Just the retaining ring, not really that important right now. We've removed the valve core, and we have the stem, and this is what we're going to put through. Boom.
Nice.
So we want a kind of a little resistance there, which is nice. We'll just push through the rest. Okay, so we are ready to kind of fit the tire on there and then seat the bead. We've got our valve core, or sorry, valve stem in there. We'll put the core in later. So this is important, and a lot of newbies, myself included, I used to do this when I didn't know how to seat tires. You want to make sure you put it on the right direction so that it's doing its job when you ride your bike. And the easiest way to do that is to look at your rotor. If you don't have a rotor, it should be labeled on your actual hub somewhere, the direction in which you should rotate the wheel. So this is saying to rotate this direction.
Where do you see that?
Can you zoom in?
Oh, yeah, okay. That says rotation right there.
Yep, so it's telling you to rotate this way in the counterclockwise direction and from your perspective. And so when we do that, we'll also find the tire. There's an arrow on the tire. So on the tire, it also gives you an arrow of rotation.
So that would be counterclockwise, so you want to put it on.
Yep, so we want to make sure we put it on the exact same direction,
Mm-hmm.
so it should sit something like that. Now, the other thing that's a nice little touch is to match your label, whatever tire you're running. It doesn't have to be Maxxis, it could be anything, with the actual stem. So that's a nice, quick, easy way of finding your stem when your riding buddies are waiting for you to pump up your tires. So you're not looking around for it.
That's cool. I never thought about that. That's a good tip.
So we're going to kind of put this on here. This is the tricky part, so we'll see what happens. So I'm doing one side at a time. Do you mind giving me a tool?
Yeah.
Sweet. So I've worked it all the way around the rim. Doesn't have to be centered on the rim, just has to be sitting in it. And then we'll use our tool. We should only need 1 or 2 pops of this thing. And I'm going to orient it in such a way that it works with gravity and with the forces. So now it's sitting on the rim and our label is matching well with the valve.
Nice.
So now we'll flip it over and work the other part in. And this is where it can get a little finicky because you're forcing it onto a rim that's smaller than the width of the tire.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll work with the same direction, kind of the same method until we get it all the way around. Common misconception is that you need a tool for this, and you don't. It actually makes your life harder sometimes. You only need it at specific points. So I'm kind of using my body to hold the rest of the rim. And then, here we go. So I'm going to be careful here because I want to make sure, you can see that, I want to make sure the tool's not going to get interference with the rubber gasket on that thing. So I'm going to work it
On the valve, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So work it
Around
it. So this is where the tool might break. We'll see.
And are you applying a lot of force here?
I am putting a lot of force on it, yes.
Yes.
There it is.
There we go. Nice.
So it's sitting on the rim now. It's not sitting in the bead. And this is where we actually use pressure, air pressure, to seat it. And this is where we put a lot of force into pumping it up. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so why do we pump up the tire first before we put the sealant in and not the other way around?
Yeah, so we took the valve core out, which allowed us to essentially put in more, there's more area for the pressure and the air to actually go in, versus trying to force it through a smaller opening with the core in the valve. That's the first thing. Second thing to answer the question is, if there's sealant already in there, you're working with another issue of where's the air going to go? Because you're forcing against all the sealant, which means harder pressure for you, much harder thing to do.
Okay.
Typically with people with compressors, you can put all the sealant in and everything at once and then just pump it all up and it'll be good. But we're doing this by hand and we want to do it the smart way.
Cool. Do we need to put the valve core back in?
So we don't want to put the core back in because we want as much area for that air to go in there to generate as much force as we can to pop that bead into its spot.
Okay.
Typically you'll get some nice popping, satisfying noises if you use a compressor, but sometimes that doesn't happen by hand. We'll see what happens. So we're just using a regular old pump that fits a Presta opening. It doesn't really matter, it just has to fit nicely on this cylinder. And then here we go.
All right.
Ah.
Why don't we just use the compressor?
So we were close, we were really close with the hand pump. We were basically, there was one little section that didn't seat. But yeah, so what we'll do now is add the sealant. Instead of breaking the bead again, we'll actually add the sealant through the valve.
That's smart.
And then just kind of estimate how much is in there. Some people try to measure it, but what I do is I usually put enough in there to where I can hear it sloshing around, which means probably good enough for it to adjust for seepage or whatever else would happen. So we're gonna do that.
Okay.
We're gonna kind of rig this up a little bit because we don't have all the proper tools. So I'm holding the kind of the nipple end of this this doohickey here, and
Syringe.
so we're about to fill up the syringe with sealant. I'm holding the nipple end of it so it doesn't run out. She's gonna fill this up, and then we'll just insert this and then press it through the actual valve.
And how many times do we have to do that?
I would say maybe 2 to 3 of these would be sufficient. And it fits right on top of that, which is kind of nice. I'm gonna put a little pressure, so just hold. And inside it goes. Now it's probably running out the sides a little bit, which is not the end of the world. And we're probably gonna put 2 more in here, and then we'll be good to go.
Cool.
And so now we'll use our tool with the respective core. Make sure you use the new core, not the old one. Feed it on there nicely. And what I like to do is grab my fingertips and kind of thread it actually. I'll actually use this tool here in a second. Make sure it threads nicely because you don't want to strip this thing. And then we should be able to just tighten her up. And you don't want to go overboard with this because it will squeeze the actual gaskets in there. But now we've got our core in there. So now, tighten this up and then we can slosh away. Just make sure it doesn't come out the sides because we haven't put any air in there yet.
Just good.
And we want to kind of spin that around. There it goes. So now it's sealed up.
Nice.
So now we've let all the sealant sit on the bottom of the rim and hold it there, and I'll pump the rest. To whatever desired pressure that you want. We got majority of it, like we said before, we got a majority of it sat with the floor pump here back here, but there were a couple more that still needed to pop sections of the bead that hadn't gone totally into place yet. So we used the compressor to kind of finish it off a little bit. And then as we put the sealant in there and popped it up, or pumped it up some more, we still had a couple more pops. So now she's sat nicely, holding lots of pressure. And then, I don't know if you can hear this or not, but you shake, we can hear nice sloshing, which means we've got enough sealant in there to plug a hole if something were to happen on the trail.
Cool.
So there you go.
Awesome. Now you guys know how to change a tire or put on a completely new tire. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, no worries. Hope you enjoy it, Graham. It'll be a good one. It's a good tire.
Bye, guys.
See ya.